Maplewood, a picturesque suburban town with charming houses and well-kept lawns, seems to be a haven of tranquility. But beneath this serene facade lies secrets sinister enough to destroy the lives of those who guard them. Fiona Miller is looking for a breath of fresh air. She's a classic beauty, tall and young, with striking blue eyes. She recently graduated and moved from her hometown in San Jose, having been selected by a well-reputed corporation, Apex Global. Behind her professional drive and desire to make a name for herself lies a dark story that Fiona carries with her every day. Fiona left behind her family of entrepreneurs. Her parents were ambitious entrepreneurs working their way to the top. Her siblings, all thriving in prestigious fields like law, medicine, engineering, and astrophysics, made her feel left behind as the youngest and a comparatively slow learner. Fiona chose an unconventional path: marketing, bringing shame upon her family. She was set on her dreams and wanted to make a life for herself on her terms. So, on a Monday morning, she finds herself nervous but ready for a new beginning. Apex Global is a giant office building, busy with executives entering and exiting through its revolving doors. After exploring her surroundings and meeting her new coworkers, Fiona finally settles into her cubicle. Still uneasy, given her coworkers' aloof and cold nature in the no-nonsense environment, she hears a knock behind her. Little does she know that this knock will change her life forever. She turns to find a man in his mid-40s with attractive features standing by her door. He has broad shoulders, cold blue eyes, pale skin, and back-swept silky hair. Wearing an expensive suit, he smiles at her. The man greets Fiona warmly and introduces himself as Mark Calloway, the chief director and manager of the marketing department. Mark's easygoing demeanor and friendly aura immediately set Fiona at ease, silently thanking the heavens for a friendly face. Mark Calloway, married for 15 years and has 2 kids he loves dearly, initially has no nefarious designs towards his newly hired secretary, simply looking upon her as a puzzled fledgling to take under his wing. After Fiona diligently performs her tasks, she finds herself standing in front of a big office with a fancy door reading Mark Calloway, Director of Marketing. She knocks. Mark notices her, shuts his laptop, and asks about the tasks. Fiona nervously hands over the documents for assessment. Mark, at first unimpressed, finds her work highly satisfying as he reads on and congratulates her on the job well done. Mark gives Fiona the rest of the day off, which she happily accepts. Fiona reaches out to take the documents back, but Mark covers her hand, telling her he isn't done with them yet. At that moment, an accidental chain of events is set off that alters the course of their lives. Their eyes meet, and an indescribable emotion passes between them, neither courageous enough to address it. Fiona leaves with butterflies in her stomach, bidding goodbye to Mark and heading home with a satisfied smile. She wonders if this is the beginning of something, so lost in her daydreams that she pays no heed to the thin crystal ring adorning Mark's left hand. Mark, known for his business acumen and frequent international travels, is a charismatic figure. To Fiona, he's a mentor, but to Mark, she's a spark of excitement in his otherwise routine life. As days bleed into weeks, Mark and Fiona keep their interactions as professional as possible, but neither can deny the sizzling undertone of their chemistry. The time comes for Mark's monthly business trip to Thailand, and he asks Fiona to accompany him for the experience. Thrilled by the opportunity, Fiona wholeheartedly agrees. As the team departs for their week-long journey, they're unaware that their professional relationship is about to turn personal. The pair attends necessary meetings, convocations, and seminars throughout the day. Unexpectedly, Mark suggests they both take a break and shift the remaining less necessary meetings to Sunday. Fiona makes the necessary arrangements, and afterward, they head to a nearby beach club to relax. Alcohol is involved, and soon couples throng the dance floor, seizing the opportunity for some holiday romance. Mark and Fiona, sensing the change in the air between them, do the same. One thing leads to another, and in a whirlwind of alcohol, lust, and thrill, Mark and Fiona kiss. Overcome by emotion, they head to their hotel, unable to keep their hands off each other. It's as if they've released their inner animals. Both are a tangle of limbs, realizing all the unspoken currents of energy between them. That night in Thailand, Mark and Fiona steer events into an unchangeable fate. Fiona is flattered by the attention from such a high-ranking and attractive senior, while Mark is thrilled by the forbidden romance, completely forgetting his innocent wife back home. Rather than retracing their footsteps, the intensity of their whirlwind romance plummets them into unceasing affection. Upon returning from the trip, they garb themselves in secrecy, concealing kisses and stolen embraces, keeping their affair hidden from colleagues. However, their frequent simultaneous absences and visibly different dynamics hinted something more than professional camaraderie. Fiona pays no heed to the family photo on Mark's desk, evidence of his commitment to his wife. She pities his wife, but is so enthralled and yearning for attention from her superior that she's afraid to lose it. She never breathes a word about his infidelity to Mark, though it hangs in the air between them. Fiona had only seen Mark's wife in the photograph on his desk, a bird-like beauty with short, red-headed curls, delicate features, and a sweet smile. Mark often talked about his kids and mentioned that Laura, his wife, was pregnant with their third child, a daughter. It took all of Fiona's willpower to keep her envy and bitterness in check as she listened to Mark. In a rare moment of contrite and remorse, Mark tried to end things with his secretary, pleading with her to move to a better department to make it easier for both of them. Fiona silenced him with a kiss and a whispered threat. "If you ever think of leaving me again, I'll destroy everything you have. Laura, your boys, your reputation, everything." She warned him that she was content with what they had and wanted nothing more, not marriage or for Mark to leave his family. Deep down, Fiona knew that if things came to a head, she'd always be just the other woman. Their affair sails smoothly for 3 months, an intoxicating whirlwind of stolen glances and secret rendezvous. Meanwhile, Mark's wife Laura begins to notice changes in her husband. He no longer comes home before 9 p.m., often smiling at his phone and locking it with a password, a new phenomenon. Mark seems preoccupied, losing himself in his phone at the dinner table. His business trips become more frequent, leaving Laura alone and suspicious. Whispered phone calls outside, a new perfume lingering on his clothes, and a new tie she finds in his wardrobe all grow her suspicion. Pregnant with their third child, a daughter she has longed for after 2 sons, the stress and anxiety weigh heavily upon her. Laura wonders if her pregnancy hormones are making her on edge and irritated lately, causing Mark to avoid her and give her space. Perhaps her heightened sensitivity and occasional mood swings are messing with her perception. Laura resolves to make more effort for her husband and mend the gaping distance growing between them. One sunny Wednesday morning, driven by love and anticipation, Laura surprises Mark at his office with his favorite brisket. She drops off her kids at school and makes her way to Mark's office building, deciding not to notify his receptionist. As she walks through the bustling halls of Apex Global, she waves to Linda, Mark's receptionist. In a hurry, she doesn't notice the startled and apprehensive look on Linda's face. Laura carries the brisket tray and steps in front of Mark's office. The door opens a crack and she sees Mark on a call, eyebrows furrowed. Laura almost steps inside, ready to yell surprise, when she catches a glimpse of a young blonde girl leaning over Mark's desk, giving him a playful peck on the lips. Mark feigns annoyance and pushes the girl away, albeit with a reluctant smile. Laura stumbles backward, tears clouding her eyes, disbelief rattling her core. The brisket drops from her hands as she stands, frozen in shock. She keeps chanting "no" in her head, refusing to believe it, but her eyes know what they've seen: her husband's betrayal. Linda stands in the hallway corner, pity marking her face. Laura's discovery is devastating. As she speeds home, brisket forgotten, she feels her blood pressure spiking. When she reaches home, she shuts herself in her room, howling and crying in pain over the betrayal from the very man she chose to marry, to hold, and to take care for in sickness and in health. Flashbacks from her parents' broken marriage run through her mind. Since childhood, Laura had seen her father's countless infidelities, her mother's aggressive and controlling behavior, and the constant fights. Her father had rarely been home, seeking solace with other women, while her mother rallied against him. Laura had always dreamed of having the perfect family, an ideal marital life, avoiding illegal substances and boyfriends, and working on herself to become the picture-perfect wife. Laura recalls meeting Mark at a mutual friend's dinner party. Mark, tall and suited up, had been talking about a recent corporate success, and Laura found in him all the qualities she'd been looking for. Their romance budded until they married. Laura could still recall how their marriage had been the talk of the town for weeks after. Time flies, and before she realizes it, it's time for Laura to pick up the kids from school. And at that moment, Laura decides to wait. She might still have time to fix her marriage. Without an illustrious career or business, her marriage was all she had. Perhaps her husband's affair is the result of her worsening emotional state, given the pregnancy. And so Laura decides to make a new start, for the sake of her marriage and for her kids. Mark's return from the office marks the beginning of a new battle for Laura. She expertly manages to keep any hint of suspicion, anger, or bitterness from her face, as she sets the table with the very same brisket she cooked for her husband. Mark already begins to feel a change in his wife, a newfound upbeatness after months of the pregnancy weighing her down. In an effort to get her husband back, she dresses up well. She was cheery and she stopped complaining, and so days passed. Yet Laura could see her efforts were bearing no fruit. Her husband was still as distant and detached, only responding to her jokes with fake smiles, and giving her one-word answers for every attempt at the conversation that she made. Chronic stress and anxiety consume her thoughts, leading to sleepless nights and endless worry about her family's future. Laura's frustration mounts with every rejection she faces from Mark. There are days when she's lost the will to even get out of bed or put up this facade anymore, but Laura's two beautiful children push her. That night, Laura resolves to confront her husband. Enough was enough. If he wasn't being wooed by her charade of love and tenderness, he would have to suffer her wrath. Laura sat on the edge of their king-size bed, the shadows from the bedside lamp casting flickering patterns on the walls. Her hands trembled as she clutched the photograph of their family, the one taken last Christmas where everyone looked so happy. The memories felt tainted now, infected by the betrayal she had witnessed earlier that day. She heard the familiar sound of Mark's car pulling into the driveway. Taking a deep breath, she steeled herself for the confrontation she knew had to happen. As the front door clicked open and Mark's footsteps echoed through the hallway, Laura felt a cold resolve wash over her. Mark entered the bedroom, loosening his tie, a tired smile on his face. "Hey, honey," he greeted her warmly, leaning in for a kiss. Laura turned her face away, unable to bear his touch. "We need to talk, Mark." Mark froze, his eyes narrowing slightly. He sat down on the bed beside her, concerned about masking his features. "What's wrong, Laura?" She handed him the family photo, her fingers gripping the edge tightly. "Are we still that family, Mark? Or have things changed?" Mark looked confused, his brow furrowing. "What are you talking about? Of course we're still that family. Why would you even ask that?" Laura's voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. She detailed what her eyes witnessed, the betrayal and shattering of a sacred bond of 15 years. For a moment, a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, crossed Mark's face. But then, like a mask slipping back into place, his expression became one of shock in disbelief. "Laura, you must have misunderstood. There's nothing going on between us. She's just a colleague, and we were discussing work." Laura echoed his words, throwing them back at him with her voice rising. Her tone was enough to show the disbelief in his lies. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Laura, listen to me. She's young and naive, and sometimes she crosses boundaries, but I would never cheat on you. You're the mother of my children, the love of my life. How could you think that of me?" Laura's resolve wavered as she stared into his eyes that had once been the windows to her soul. She wanted to believe him, but the image of that kiss was seared into her mind. So Laura reiterates that kiss, evidence clear as day. Mark reached out, gently taking her hands in his. He said he was under a lot of pressure at work. He explained how he'd been trying to keep things professional, but despite all of his efforts, his coworker had misread the situation. He admits that he should have been more careful and promises Laura there was nothing between his secretary and him. He loved her, and only her. Tears welled up in Laura's eyes. She could feel the fury boiling inside her, but she forced herself to nod. Maybe she had overreacted. The words were like acid on her tongue. She explained that she didn't want to lose him. Mark pulled her into a hug, his embrace warm and seemingly sincere as he pledged that she was not going to lose him and they'd get through this together. He said he would talk to her and make sure she understood that she couldn't behave like that. Laura buried her face in his shoulder, letting the tears flow. On the surface, she appeared remorseful for doubting him, but inside, her anger burned hotter than ever. She could feel his lies wrapping around her like a constricting snake, squeezing the trust out of their relationship. She knew she couldn't trust him anymore, and the realization only fueled her inner rage. As Mark held her, whispering reassurances, Laura's mind raced. She had to find a way to expose him, to make him pay for his deceit. But for now, she would play the part of the forgiving wife, waiting for the right moment to strike back. With a final squeeze, Mark pulled away slightly, looking into her eyes. He expressed his happiness that they had talked about this. Laura's mind was now on other things, though. She would find a way to uncover the truth and make him face the consequences of his betrayal. The game had only just begun. Then, one fateful afternoon, Laura's busy hosting a friend over for lunch when she feels a sharp pain in her abdomen. She excuses herself and struggles to make her way to the toilet, where she notices a stream of blood running down her leg. The world seems to stop for Laura as a soundless scream escapes her. She holds her abdomen as if trying by any means to save her child, her beautiful daughter, the one she had prayed and hoped for after having 2 sons. She collapses in agony as realization sets in and she's helpless to stop it. She's lost her baby. She shrieks in agony, devastated by the losses in her life, one after another. Her wails attract her friend, who rushes over, staying by Laura's side and consoling her. Her friend asks to call Mark, but Mark is away on a 3-day business trip. This traumatic loss fuels Laura's rage, and for the first time, ignites a thirst for vengeance. 2 evenings later, Laura waits eagerly for Mark to return from work. She's not told him about losing the baby over the phone. Laura is calm before the storm. She masks her inner fury with a calm demeanor. She prepares his dinner that night with a deadly twist. 5 tablespoons of antifreeze, straight from the bottle. Mark arrives home, oblivious to Laura's inner turmoil, and sits down to enjoy his meal. Mark is so lost in reminiscing about the incredible vacation he shared with Fiona that he doesn't even pay a thought to his wife's visibly ill health. Later that night, as he settles into bed, he struggles to sleep. The mousse unusually sweet. He wakes up in bed at midnight, all of a sudden, clutching his chest. His breath becomes shallow as his loud, labored wheezes rouse Laura from her light slumber. Laura sees Mark's protruding eyes as he thrashes helplessly, as she slowly leaves her bed to stand, drinking in the sight. Her husband snaps toward her, looking at her helplessly as his eyes beseech for help. Laura can hear words and a voice, and she realizes it's her own. She can hear herself scream at her husband. "You broke us. You broke our family, and you destroyed my life. I know everything about your skinny blonde side piece." And she wails as she calls him the murderer of their unborn child. Laura can see the shock and realization that registers on her husband's face. Tears stream from her eyes, and Laura is surprised to sense that deep within the chasm of rage and vengeance for her dead child and broken dreams, Laura finds grief. Grief for the person she once loved, and some part of her would always love. Mark fights for only a few more seconds, his eyes bloodshot. Then he collapses with a thump. Mark Calloway is no longer in this world, and so Laura slowly dials 911. Operators arrive at the scene, and the ruckus rouses the unsuspecting neighborhood from its slumber. Neighbors gather around the Calloway house as Mark's covered body is carried out on the stretcher. There was no hope of saving his life. it had been too late by the time they arrived. The officers on the scene of death are only met with an unconsolable and hysterical wife with her two confused, frightened children who'd not even fully understood how their lives had changed forever. Maplewood is rocked by the news of Mark's sudden death. Detective Jane Carver, a seasoned investigator with a sharp mind and a reputation for her tenacity, is called to the scene. Having dealt with cases of murdered spouses in the past, something about the situation feels off to her as soon as she's called to the scene. As Detective Carver begins to dig deeper with her partner, Detective Paul Mitchell, Jane stumbles upon question after question about the case. Why did Laura take so long to call the emergency services? What caused the sudden and odd death of her husband? Detective Carter sets out to uncover the layers of deceit and betrayal that led to Mark's death, counting on the autopsy report to guide her. The autopsy finally breaks ground in the case of Mark Calloway's mysterious death, sending shockwaves through the neighborhood. It reveals traces of antifreeze in Mark's system, turning this investigation into a homicide case. Jane and Paul's relentless questions lead them to Mark Calloway's widow's doorstep. Laura has, throughout, put up the perfect exterior for a grieving widow, welcoming consolers and expressing her shock at the loss of her life partner. The detectives call her into the station, pretending it was a routine inquiry. The detectives probe with questions, normal and mundane at first. Increasingly, the team of detectives starts putting more pressure on Laura Calloway. They ask about her marriage, her kids, and her pregnancy. Laura withstands this, but as the hour wears on and morning bleeds into the afternoon, Laura's at her wit's end. As Detective Carter places her hands on the table and shouts in Laura's face, her barriers break. Laura Calloway spills her grief and betrayal out to the detectives as she details the events that led to her husband's death, from the betrayal of her husband to his actions, which caused her to suffer a miscarriage after so much struggle to conceive a daughter. She leaves no stone unturned. Laura is immediately arrested and charged with murder, and the trial becomes a media sensation. The case takes over Maplewood and transforms it forever, with media teams thronging the neighborhood to get any piece of information on the wife who poisoned her husband so ingeniously. Was she a cold-blooded killer, or a distraught wife driven with grief and rage? Maplewood is divided, with some residents sympathizing with Laura and others condemning her act. Fiona, racked with guilt and fear, resigns from her position at Apex Global. Her affair with her boss taints and maligns her in her company, eyes following her everywhere as if accusing her of Mark's murder. The investigation and police interest in her after Laura revealed her as the adulteress sets Fiona on edge. Fiona gives all the information that she can, detailing the start of the affair with Mark and how their romance plummeted. She denies having any dreams of a future with Mark, revealing how neither of them had yet come to discuss where their relationship would go. And so, after the police give her the go-ahead, Fiona Miller leaves the very town she came to seeking a fresh start, leaving an indelible mark on the lives of everyone forever. The court proceedings start off, and Laura is represented by a public defender who also happens to be a family friend. Laura's cousin, a skilled orator, painted a picture of a loving wife, devastated by her husband's betrayal and the subsequent loss of her child. He highlights the stress, the sleepless nights, and the constant fear that gnawed at Laura's soul. The prosecutor starts by putting forward all the evidence that implicates Laura Calloway, starting with the strongest, her confession. The prosecuting lawyer expertly argues why Laura's statement is acceptable and admissible in a court of law, citing her presence of mind and sanity, and detailing her broken relationship with Mark Calloway as contributing factors to her guilt. The courtroom was buzzing with the media frenzy surrounding the case. Laura, sitting beside her cousin, felt a strange sense of satisfaction as Mark's lawyers, flustered by the compelling narrative, struggled to defend him. Mark's lawyers argued that the heart attack was caused by antifreeze and not natural causes. They claimed that Laura was responsible because she was a manipulative woman seeking revenge for a broken marriage. However, Laura's cousin presented evidence of the volatile cocktail of emotions Laura was experiencing. He called upon expert witnesses who testified that the chronic stress induced by Mark's infidelity could have significantly contributed to his death. The prosecution further highlights witness testimonies from Mark Calloway's office, colleagues and eyewitnesses who saw the affair unfold and develop in front of their eyes. Laura's chances at acquittal are further damaged when her own friend Maggie testifies to Laura's miscarriage. Different statements are taken from the neighborhood, which depicts Laura's intense yearning for the perfect picket white fence life. They paint her as a motivated go-getter wife who would go to any lengths to protect her family life. And that's why they mention in the bustling courtroom when Laura's dream shattered, she couldn't withstand the pain of it all. And so, with grief clouding her mind, she chose to eliminate the man she blamed and deemed as the source of her pain. The court proceedings drag on for a few weeks, but as time passes, it becomes evident that the facts of the case are not in Laura's favor. And so, on December 3rd, Laura Calloway was found guilty and sentenced to prison. The gavel strikes, and Laura's put behind bars for life, with the possibility of parole for the sake of her children. The once idyllic Calloway family is shattered, leaving their children to be raised by their grandparents. Detective Jane Carter reflects on the case, saddened by the tragic outcomes, but resolved to continue her fight for justice. Maplewood, though scarred, begins to heal. As for Laura Calloway, after 3 months in the Northern State Prison, the inmates and prison officials complained about her conversations with non-existent children. Laura was seen many times swaddling and cooing to a bundle of her duvet in her arms, mistaking it for her lost child, whom she named Annie. The court then ruled Laura Calloway needed psychiatric hospitalization given her growing attacks on male officers, where she would always scream profanities at them, calling them by her dead husband's name. As for Fiona Miller, her dreams of building a career and life for herself were bleak. The case of Mark Calloway's murder was a media circus, and the fame that it brought to Fiona as the infamous adulteress and man-stealer were some of the kinder words used for her across social media and the general public. Fiona would be met with stares everywhere she went, her distinctive hair standing out. For a long time, she wasn't able to find jobs in any companies. She was forced to move back to her parents' home, the last place she ever wanted to go. Even years after the scandal, she faced public stigma and humiliation. The tragic story of the Calloway family serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of betrayal and the fragility of trust. The once serene community now carries the heavy burden of a tale that will be remembered for years to come.